I want to start with a question I asked myself about 2 years ago. I was sitting at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon, and I realized it had been 3 weeks since anyone had come over. Not 3 weeks since I'd left the house. I'd been to the hardware store, to the post office, to the diner twice. 3 weeks since anyone had sat in a chair in my kitchen. And I thought about that for a long time, about the people who used to come, the neighbors who'd stop by without calling first, the friends who'd drive over on a Saturday afternoon just to sit on the porch and talk about nothing much, the children who come less often now that they're deep in their own lives and far away. I thought about whether it was just the natural thinning that happens as you get older, the attrition of a social life, the friends who move away, the ones who die, the ones who get absorbed into their grandchildren's lives. Some of it is just that. That's real. But some of it wasn't attrition. Some of it was me. Some of it was things I'd been doing, quietly, without knowing I was doing them, that were making it harder for people to want to come. I'm 82 years old. My name is Walter. And today I want to talk about 11 behaviors I've noticed in older people, including in myself, that push people away without the person knowing they're doing it. Quiet behaviors. Habits that accumulated slowly over the years until they became part of the furniture of who you are. I want to be honest about which of these are mine, or were mine. Some of them I've changed. Some of them I'm still working on. Some of them I only understood I was doing after someone close to me, a child, a friend, said something that made me stop and think. These aren't character flaws. They're habits. Habits that build up at this age for understandable reasons. Loss, pain, fear, the long accumulation of hard years. But habits that cost something in the relationships you still have, in the people who are still here and who might come less often or less warmly if the habits go on unchecked. 11 of them, honestly, with the stories. Sit with me. The fire's going. The first is repeating the same stories. I know how this sounds. You've heard it before. Old people tell the same stories. It's a cliché. But I want to look at it more carefully than the cliché does, because I think there's something underneath the behavior that's worth understanding before you can really change it. I caught myself doing this specifically with Bob, about 5 years before he died. We were sitting on his porch on a September afternoon, and I started telling a story about a job I'd done in 1974. A difficult renovation of an old Victorian in Bangor, tricky staircase work, a homeowner who kept changing her mind about the design. I'd told Bob that story before, more than once. I knew I'd told it before, and I told it again anyway. He listened. He was kind about it. But somewhere in the middle of it, I saw him look out at the yard with that particular quality of patience that means you're waiting for something to end rather than engaging with it. I stopped mid-story. I said, "Bob, I've told you this one before, haven't I?" And he said, "Walter, it's a good story," which was his way of saying yes. Why do we do it? I've thought about this, and here's what I think. The stories we repeat are usually the ones that contain something important from our lives. The ones that carry something, an achievement, a loss, a piece of identity. We tell them again because we're still working with what they mean to us, still carrying them, still deriving something from the telling. The repetition is not carelessness, it's a need. But the other person doesn't know that. They just experience the story again. And the again, over time, tells them something. That you're not tracking their experience. That your need to tell is stronger than your curiosity about them. The fix isn't to suppress the stories. It's to ask first. To say, "Have I told you about the Victorian house in Bangor?" Or to say, "There's something I keep thinking about lately and it has to do with 1974. That way the other person becomes a participant in the choice to hear it, rather than an audience for something they didn't ask for. The second behavior is interpreting everything negatively. Helen used to call it Walter's dark weather. She said it with affection, but she meant it accurately. There was a tendency in me, and I've watched it in other people too, particularly as they get older, to interpret ambiguous things in the worst direction. When David didn't call for 2 weeks, my first thought wasn't, "he's busy." It was, "something's wrong." Or he's angry about something. When the neighbor didn't wave one morning, my first thought wasn't, she didn't see me. It was, she's annoyed about something. The interpretation is usually wrong, but the interpretation has already colored the response. I'm slightly colder to the neighbor the next time I see her, because I've decided she was annoyed. I'm slightly careful on the call with David, because I've decided he's angry. The other person feels the slight coldness or the slight carefulness and doesn't know what caused it. And the relationship gets a little harder than it needs to be. This habit accelerates in old age, I think, because old age brings genuine things to worry about. Real losses, real disappointments, real moments when things go wrong. And the brain, having had enough experience of bad things happening, starts to assume the bad thing more quickly, starts to see it coming even when it isn't. I try to catch it now. When the negative interpretation arrives, I try to ask myself, what's the other explanation? Usually there are several. The neighbor didn't wave because she was looking down. David didn't call because his kids were sick. Most of the time, the negative explanation is the least likely one. I just got there first. The third behavior is making the conversation about your symptoms. I'm going to be plain about this one because it's the one I've seen do the most damage in specific relationships I've watched. When you're older, things hurt. Things go wrong in the body in ways you can't ignore and often can't hide. The back, the knees, the thumb that aches in cold weather, the procedures, the medications, the monitoring. All of it is real, and all of it takes up mental space and physical energy. But when it also takes up most of the conversation, when the person who comes to visit you leaves knowing far more about your digestion than they wanted to know, and far less about their own life than they'd like to have been asked about, they start to have a particular feeling about the visit. They still love you. They'll still come. But something in them prepares on the way over. Prepares to receive the medical update. Prepares to be patient. And preparation in that direction is already a kind of distance. I know this because my wife's uncle had this quality. Every visit, every phone call was dominated by his physical complaints. He had a lot of them, genuine ones. But the effect was that none of us could quite relax around him. Every conversation felt like a triage. What's wrong this week? How bad is it? Is this new? After he died, the conversations among the family were noticeably warmer. That observation shamed me, but it was true. I'm not saying don't talk about your health. I'm saying proportion. One part of the conversation is fine. Two parts is beginning to be the whole of the visit. I try now to ask one question for every health update I give. How's Karen doing? What did David Jr. end up deciding about the job? The asking doesn't fix the health, but it changes the nature of the visit, from a report to a conversation. The fourth behavior is advising when you are asked for company. I've talked about this in other conversations, but I want to say it specifically in this context, because it's one of the most common ways older people push away the younger ones who love them. When your adult child, or your grandchild, or a younger friend comes to you with a problem, they've usually already thought about the possible solutions. They're not coming to you because they couldn't figure out what to do. They're coming to you because they need someone to know about it, to hold it with them, to say, I understand. That sounds hard. What they almost never need is for you to immediately start generating solutions. I was a solution generator for most of my life. It's the carpenter in me. You see a problem, you identify the issue, you fix it. When David would come to me with something difficult, I'd have 2 or 3 suggestions before he'd finish describing the situation. And he'd get a look, not unkind, just resigned, that said, I didn't come for that. Helen taught me. She'd put her hand on my arm when she could see me starting to fix. Just her hand on my arm. Enough. After she died, I had to teach myself. I started asking, before I said anything, are you looking for help thinking this through, or do you need to say it? Most of the time, the answer is the second one. And the second one is harder for me. It requires me to be still and useful at the same time, not doing, holding. The fifth behavior is being reliably hard to reach, and then wondering why people stop reaching. But first, I want to add something more about the advising, because I think there's a specific pattern that older people fall into that I haven't named yet. There's a version of advice giving that isn't really about the other person at all. It's about the giver, about the need to be useful, to be expert, to be the one who has the answer. And at a certain age, when a lot of the traditional roles have wound down, when the work is done and the children are grown, and the things you used to be the authority on have mostly passed to younger hands, the role of advice giver can become one of the last places where you feel reliably needed. I noticed this in myself when I thought about why I rushed to fix things in conversations. The fixing wasn't only about the other person's problem. The fixing was also about me, about reasserting competence, about being the man who could see what was needed and provide it, about not being the one in the room who had the least to offer. That's worth knowing, because once I understood the need underneath the advising, I could find other ways to meet it. The competence can show up as presence rather than prescription. The usefulness can be the holding of someone's hard thing while they figure it out, which requires more skill than the fixing, not less. The being needed can look like being the person who creates the space for them to find their own answer, which is often a more profound contribution than handing them mine. That realization changed not just how I give advice, but why I was giving it in the first place. And the why matters as much as the how. This one is specific, and I think it's more common than people admit. When older people stop answering their phones as readily, when calls go to voicemail, when texts go unanswered for a day or two, when there's a pattern of missing and calling back later, the younger people in their lives learn to accommodate the pattern. They call less often. They assume you'll call back. They stop initiating the spontaneous calls because they've learned that the spontaneous calls often don't connect. And then the older person says, "David barely calls anymore. Susan called twice this week, and that felt different from usual." The children feel far away, but the children have been calling. Their calls are just ending differently than they used to. I went through a period of this in the years right after Helen died. I let calls go to voicemail because I wasn't sure I had the energy for the conversation. I'd call back later when I was better positioned to talk. Except sometimes later was 3 days later. And the 3-day gap told David something, even if I didn't mean it to. It told him that reaching me required some planning. What changed it was a conversation with Susan, who said gently, "Pop, when I call and I go to voicemail, I worry for the 3 days. Not a lot, but I worry." And she was right. She had been. I started answering more. Not always. There are still days when I let it go, but I try now to answer more than I defer. The conversation I wasn't sure I had the energy for turns out, most of the time, to be exactly what I needed. The sixth behavior is talking about the past without asking about the present. This is different from repeating stories, though they're related. This one is about the proportion of a conversation that goes toward the past versus the proportion that goes toward the other person's actual life right now. I can be absorbed in the past. I have a lot of it. More of it than I have future at 82, and a great deal more of it than my grandchildren have. The past is where Helen is. It's where the children were small and the shop was at full production and my father was still alive. The past is rich for me in a way the present sometimes isn't. But when I'm absorbed in the past with another person, I'm not entirely with them. I'm with 1974, or 1985, or the decade when their mother was young and the house was full. And the other person, who is living in 2025 with their own particular fullness and difficulty and moment, is slightly to the side of where my attention actually is. Helen was better at the balance than I am. She could move fluidly between remembering and asking. She'd tell a story from the early years and then say, "And what about you? How are things with the apartment?" Making the past a bridge to the present rather than a destination. I try to ask one question for every 10 minutes I spend in the past, not always successfully, but the trying has changed the conversations enough that I can feel the difference. The seventh behavior is being physically and emotionally closed when people are near. I mean this in a specific, observable way, not the emotional processing that happens in private, the physical and emotional closedness that happens when someone is actually there, in the room, trying to reach you. I was a closed person for most of my life. Arms crossed, chair angled slightly away, answers brief, face not showing much. Helen used to say I needed warming up before I could talk. That the first 20 minutes of any visit I was like a cold engine, technically functional, but not quite turning over. She was right. And she knew how to warm me up. A particular quality of patience she had, a way of not needing anything from me right away, that gradually let me settle in. The people who come to see me now don't all have Helen's particular patience. And if I meet them with the closed version of myself, the brief answers, the face that isn't inviting continuation, some of them stop trying to get further in. The visit becomes a courtesy call rather than a real visit. And over time, courtesy calls happen less often. I try now to be warmer at the start, to say, "I'm glad you came," and to mean it visibly, to ask a first question before the coffee is even poured, to let them see from the first moment that I'm actually glad they're there. It doesn't come naturally, but I've learned it well enough that it's no longer an act. The eighth behavior is making people feel guilty for having lives of their own. This one is painful to name because the guilt-making is almost never intentional. It comes from pain. It comes from loneliness and from missing people, and from the legitimate difficulty of being old and somewhat alone. But the effect is real regardless of the intention. It sounds like, "We haven't talked in so long," or "I didn't hear from you over Christmas. I wasn't sure you'd forgotten about me," or "David mentioned he'd been busy. I suppose that's why I haven't heard." All of these are true statements. All of them land on the other person as weight, as a reminder that they've fallen short, as evidence of what they owe. And the owing, when it's felt often enough, changes the nature of the call or the visit. What should be a simple reaching out becomes a payment on a debt. And payment on a debt is a much less satisfying thing to give than freely given love. Helen never did this. In 54 years, I never heard her make someone feel guilty for how often they called or came. She simply called when she wanted to call and received warmly when they came. She made reaching her feel easy. She made the call feel like a gift they were giving her rather than an obligation they were fulfilling. I've tried to take that from her. To say, when David calls, "I'm so glad you called," not, "It's been a while." The first one makes him want to call again. The second one makes him brace for the next time. Let me tell you about a specific conversation that showed me the full cost of the guilt-making, because I think the specific story is the only way to make the principle real. When Susan was in her late 30s, there was a stretch of about 4 months where she didn't call as often as she usually did. Her husband Tom had changed jobs. They'd moved to a new apartment in Boston. She was managing a lot at once. She told me this later. At the time, I didn't know any of it. I just knew she wasn't calling. And I let her know that I noticed. Not in a dramatic way. In the way I described, the small comments, the offhand remarks. When she did call, I'd say something like, "I was wondering when I'd hear from you," or, "It's been quiet here, not that you'd know." Small things, but they accumulated. What I didn't know was what those small things were costing her on the other end. She told me, years later, that during that period, calling me had become something she had to steel herself to do. Not because she didn't love me, because she knew she'd left me too long, and now there would be the accounting. And the accounting made the call feel heavy in a way that calls to her mother had never felt heavy. She called her mother every few days during that period. Her mother never made the call feel like a debt payment. I sat with that for a long time when she told me. With the fact that my daughter had called me less, not because she loved me less, but because I'd made the calling harder. I'd added weight to something that should have been light. I've tried very hard not to do it since, to receive every call as its own gift, to never let the gap between calls become a subject of conversation. Every older person has things that are changing. The body is different than it was. The energy is different. The capacities are different. These changes are real and they deserve acknowledgement. But there's a version of acknowledging them that becomes, over time, a kind of performance of decline, where every ache becomes evidence of the coming end, where every limitation becomes an occasion for grief, where the ordinary Tuesday of an 82-year-old life, some things harder, some things different, most things still workable, becomes a recurring reminder that things aren't what they were. The people who love you want to know when something is genuinely concerning. They don't want every conversation to be a vigil over a decline that may still be decades away. I caught myself doing this in a particular way with Susan. I was talking to her about my knee, which had been bothering me that month, and I drifted from the knee to the general state of my body to the general question of how much longer I could manage the house. All in one phone call, all from a sore knee. She got quiet in the way she gets quiet when she's worried, and I realized I'd taken her from a Thursday evening at home, probably tired from her nursing shift, and pulled her into a spiral about my mortality that wasn't warranted by the original sore knee. When I'm tempted to spiral now, I try to stop at the actual thing. The knee hurts this month. That's the thing. Not the house, not the stairs, not the end. Just the knee. One thing at a time. The rest will announce itself when it needs to. The 10th behavior is being visibly ungrateful when people help. I know this one might surprise people. Ungrateful seems obvious, obviously bad, obviously worth avoiding. But the way it appears in older people is often subtle. It's not a flat refusal to say thank you. It's a particular quality of receiving help that communicates, "This is less than adequate," or "I would have done this differently myself," or "You did it, but you shouldn't have to." I did this with David for years. He'd come up and do something for me, splitting the firewood, fixing the furnace filter, helping me rehang the door that had been sticking since the fall, and I'd receive it with a kind of provisional gratitude that was mixed with a quality of, "It shouldn't be necessary. Thank you for doing that. It's just that the door shouldn't have been sticking in the first place." Or, "Thank you, I could have managed it myself, but I appreciate it." That last part, "I could have managed it myself," was the problem, because it was implicitly true and explicitly a rejection of the gift. David wasn't splitting wood because I couldn't split wood. He was splitting wood because he wanted to do something for his father, and the "I could have managed it" told him his wanting didn't quite count. I try now to receive fully, to say thank you in a way that makes the thing a gift, because it is a gift. The firewood is a gift. The door is a gift. The fact that my son drives 4 hours round trip to put his hands on things in my house because he needs to feel useful to me, that's the gift. The door is just the occasion. The 11th behavior, and I want to take the most time with this one because I think it's the one that does the most damage while looking the least like damage, is withdrawing into a form of dignity that actually creates distance. Let me say what I mean precisely. There is a particular way that some older people hold themselves, a particular quality of reserve, carriage, composure. They don't ask too much. They don't show weakness. They maintain the appearance of being entirely all right, even when they're not. They receive visitors graciously and say nothing that makes the visitor uncomfortable. They don't burden anyone with the inner weather. From outside, this looks like dignity. It looks like strength. It looks like someone who has their life together. From inside, it's often a form of loneliness. The person is entirely present in the room, but the room never gets the actual person. The visitor leaves without having reached anything. The conversation was pleasant, but nothing was exchanged. I lived this way for a long time. The carpenter's version of it. The man who handles his own business, who doesn't make his interior other people's concern, who is always functional and reliable and composed. And the result was that the people who loved me most got the composed version of me, and not the actual one. They got the surface. And the surface, over years of surface, can feel like not quite being loved. Because the person who is always all right is a person who doesn't need you. Not really. And needing, in the real sense of it, is part of what love runs on. Helen reached me anyway. She had the particular gift of getting past the composed surface to the man underneath it. She'd watch me for a week, and she'd see what I wasn't saying, and she'd find the moment to say, "Walter, what is it?" She was the only person in my life who consistently got past it. When she died, the surface closed over, because the person who'd been breaching it was gone, and I was left behind it, composed and private, and increasingly alone. The work since then has been learning to breach it myself, to let what's underneath come into the room without someone having to extract it, to say, without being asked, that I've had a hard week, or that I miss Helen in a particular way today, or that I'm afraid of something. To make the interior visible enough that the people who love me don't have to work so hard to reach it. It's the hardest of the 11. I know that because it's the one I'm still working on most. The surface is well made. It took decades to build. Dismantling it, even partially, is slow work. But here's what I've found in the partial dismantling. The people who come through the breach, who get to see the actual interior instead of the managed surface, they don't leave frightened or burdened. They leave closer, warmer. They come back sooner. They sit for longer. They ask the real questions. Because what people want when they love you is you, not the composed version. You. I want to be very specific about one moment where this became clear to me, because the moment was small and its effect was large. About 3 years ago, Lily came up for a long weekend in November. Second day she was there, we had supper, and we were sitting with the fire afterward, and she was quiet in a way that suggested she was thinking about something. And I asked, the way I've been practicing asking, "What are you thinking about?" She said she was worried about a friendship that was in trouble. A close friend from college, a difficult misunderstanding, some things said that were hard to take back. And instead of saying what I'd have said 5 years before, "Here's what I'd do, here's how these things usually resolve, here's what the right move is," I just said, "Tell me about her, the friend." And Lily told me. For about 45 minutes, she told me about this friend, who she was, how they'd met, what the friendship had meant over 4 years of college, what had happened, what she was afraid it meant. I listened. I asked 2 or 3 questions, not advice questions, curious questions. What was it that made you close? What do you miss most? At the end of it, she said, "Grampy, I don't know why, but I feel better." She felt better because she'd been seen, because someone had been interested in her actual interior instead of her solvable problem. And I could only do that, could only be that interested, because I wasn't running the part of my brain that was generating solutions. I was fully in the room with her. That's what being inside the surface instead of behind it gives you. The room. And the room, it turns out, is where everything important happens. Outside, the November dark has a particular quality. Not cold exactly, just dense. The kind of dark that makes the fire feel more like a room of its own. I want to say something before I close about why I shared these 11 things. Not to make anyone ashamed. The people who do most of these, the symptom reporting, the story repeating, the composed surface keeping, they're not bad people. They're mostly people who are in some kind of pain and who have developed habits around that pain that made sense at some point and have calcified into something harder. The pain is real. The habits are understandable. What I've found is that being aware of them gives you a choice. You don't have to keep doing the thing. The habit is not the person. The person can choose differently. Even at 82, even after decades of a particular way of being, I am better company now than I was at 75. Not better in every way, but in the ways I've described. The conversations are more real. The visits are less likely to end with the other person slightly relieved. The relationships feel more like what I wanted them to be. That's worth something. At 82, with the people who are still here, the relationships are worth everything. And here's the final thing I want to say. The 11 behaviors I've described, they're not failures of character. They're not signs of a person who doesn't care or who has given up. In most cases, they're the accumulated responses of someone who has been hurt and lonely and changed by time. The story repeating comes from needing to be heard. The guilt-making comes from loneliness. The composed surface comes from years of being taught that strength means not asking. The catastrophizing comes from genuine fear. The origin is understandable. The habit is what we can work on. And working on it, being even a little more present, a little more open, a little more interested in the person on the other side of the fire, that work pays back more than almost anything else I've found at this age. Because the people are still here. Some of them. And while they're here, they deserve the actual me. So do I. If anything I said today reached you, you can subscribe to walk with me a while longer. I read every comment. Tell me which of the 11 you recognized. Tell me what you found if you've been working on any of this yourself. I'd like to know. Take care of yourself. Answer the phone. Ask a question. Let them see you. The fire's still going. I'll see you next time.